On today's episode of the Seahawkers podcast, we're going back in time a couple of days to a conversation I had with Snyder of Bootleg Football. We had a chance to sit down. This was right after the DK Metcalf trade request. So this conversation happened before the Geno trade, before the DK trade, and before we got word that Ernest Jones and Jaron Reed were re-signing with the Seahawks. So as we talk about the draft, there may be some things that are a little bit outdated, but I wanted to go back, bring you this conversation with EJ. I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome to the Seahawkers podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Schultz, and today we are talking NFL draft. We're talking NFL Combine, and we are doing it with a good buddy of mine from Bootleg Football. You can follow him out on X at FootballEJ. He is EJ Snyder. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I'm recovering. Turns out all I had to do was come home and go to sleep, and Ryan Poles would fix the Bears' offensive line. So if I'd known, I would have gone to the Combine 3 years ago and starved myself for sleep and come home, and it magically would have happened. But no, recovering. 9 days in Indy is a very long time. Learned a lot, heard a lot, saw a lot. But I'm happy to be back in the Northwest and sleeping. Sleeping is a hell of a drug.
So are you saying that maybe if I had gone to the Combine instead of you, that maybe the Seahawks make that deal for Joe Thuney and give up a fifth next year to help fix their guard problem that they've had consistently? This is on me? You're putting this on me that it was me that didn't fix the Seahawks offensive line.
I'm not going to go that far, but I have had certain other Seahawks fans whom you know, reaching out and saying, so what's the deal? Like, how do you do this? Asking for a friend because we need to.
Yeah. Great. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to talk offensive line. We're going to talk defensive line. Gosh, we're going to go all over the board, but EJ, you know where we've got to start? We've got to start at wide receiver because there was some news this week.
Yeah, just a little bit.
A little bit of news is Tyler Lockett cut from the team, and then just moments later, DK Metcalf announces that he would like to be traded. And then all of a sudden, as Seahawks fans, we're going, wait a second. I expected the Tyler thing, just because his contract was a little high. Not so much expecting the DK thing. Like, where are we at wide receiver? And now I'm wondering if wide receiver is going to be a need for our Seahawks. Where are we going to go? Are we going to find a wide receiver early? And can they do it much like, I don't know, Jacksonville's found a guy. The Lions found a guy in the 4th round a few years ago in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, if we could do that, then I'd feel a lot more comfortable about moving on from DK. But, guys like Puka Nacua and Amon-Ra St. Brown only fall to the later rounds, like, I don't know, every so often.
It's true. It is not something to count on. It is something that does happen occasionally. If DK does not leave, and that's a total possibility, everybody needs to sort of brace themselves for that. Again, he has asked for a trade. That is not uncommon. It is a leverage tactic for, contract and, getting paid, trying to maximize that payday. And I'm all for NFL players trying to do that. Does not mean he will not be a Seahawk going forward. He has not burned those bridges and said, I will never put on, blue, green, and silver again. That's not happening. So if he doesn't leave, wide receiver is not a pressing need for the Seahawks. If he does leave in a trade, oh yeah, you better get real familiar with the wide receiver prospects in this draft.
And part of it, EJ, too, was when I saw, it was just a week ago, and Lance Zierlein came out with one of his mock drafts, and I know you ran into Lance while you were at the Combine. And a week ago, I'd have been like, well, what's Lance talking about? Sending a wide receiver to the Seahawks, Matthew Golden, as a Seahawks receiver when – we're doing all right at that spot. Why are we not being mocked an offensive lineman? But now I'm going, what did Lance know?
Right. Yeah, you never know. Lance is an OG. I had the pleasure of meeting him on the field this year in Indianapolis. I've followed his work for years and years, of course. His dad was obviously involved in football as well. This is somebody that's has a tenured legacy in terms of the NFL, and whose opinions I really respect, but no idea what he maybe heard or did not hear. Uh, Sometimes folks like Lance or DJ get a heads up about those sort of things about, hey, it's possible that both Seattle wide receivers that are remaining after Lockett might not be there. So they'll throw some chum in the water that way. But Matthew Golden would be a very nice replacement. Wide receiver from Texas who ran extremely quickly at the combine. Has the
Second
ability,
fastest time at the
yeah,
combine,
has the
4.29.
ability to get open. Originally ran a 4.3. They adjusted it down to a 4.29 or 4.28. And, a big bodied wide receiver who has a really nice skill set. And I'm not going to say he's DK, but could certainly fill a lot of that DK role as a rookie. Would not be a bad sort of shoe-in replacement if DK were to leave. So not a bad place to start if you're looking at other big-bodied wide receivers who could be that sort of, outside guy that can take basically the load in the offense that DK does right now. Alec Almar from Stanford, big guy, ran really well at the combine. Jaden Higgins from Iowa State is a guy that I think is sort of tailor-made to drop into that role and succeed at it. Uses his size very well to quote unquote moss defenders down the sideline. Certainly the role he played at Iowa State. Big guy that moves pretty well, was really close to him in drills, and he can sink his hips and turn and do things that guys at his size typically can't. He's going to get drafted high as well. And then there's some bigger bodied guys farther on down the board if they don't prioritize it with their first pick. Guys like Savion Williams from TCU. Really have to see how his medicals check out, but he is extremely big, 6'4", 220-ish, I think. And, there are other large wide receivers in this draft that really, if you're looking for that big body outside, down the boundary, we're going to throw it up and he's going to go get it. There's 4 or 5 guys throughout the first 2 to 3 rounds that the Seahawks could find. It is not a draft bereft of size at wide receiver.
I didn't hear you say that we're going to draft McMillan out of Arizona with the pick that the Patriots give us, because we're getting a first rounder for DK. So top 5, we just replace him with McMillan, right?
Sure, straight up, that'll absolutely happen. No, you're not getting a first rounder for DK. It's not that DK is not a talented player or a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. He is the current market for picks in the NFL is not going to allow first rounder. And if it is, it's going to be a future first rounder. It's not going to be this year. But I doubt it's going to be a first rounder at all because he still has to get paid. That's the whole point, is he wants a raise. He wants his payday at 27, not at 28 or 29 if he gets franchised. And that's a smart play by him and his camp to try and maximize his value and get the next big contract. Now, because of that, teams trading for him know that is a stipulation, and they're not throwing a first round pick on top of all that money. They'll say, hey, we'll give you a second rounder. We'll give you a third rounder and something else, but we're not giving you a first rounder and then going and paying him $30+ million. That's not going to happen. So they'll meet somewhere in the middle. That'll probably be in the second round. So I don't think you're getting Ted McMillan. Like, sure, he would be a great replacement, but he's also probably going to go top 15 at worst. There was a lot of scuttlebutt about the fact that he was going to run very slowly if he ran the 40 in Indy. I heard some very high estimates, slow estimates, that is, for 6'7", maybe 4'6'9", which is not a death knell. There have been wide receivers that have run 4'7", but after you get past 4'7", the number diminishes very, very quickly. There's about 3 or 4 wide receivers who have run greater than a 4'7" and never been anything in the NFL in terms of production. So really, if Tet ran at the combine, which he did not, he's going to run at his pro day. I think he might not. He might just not run. He might just stand on his tape, which honestly wouldn't be a terrible play. His tape is very good, and his running can probably do nothing but hurt him. If he was going to run in Indy, the only thing he had to do was not be terrible. He had to not be like awful, historic, slow. I did stand right next to him. One of the things folks probably might not realize about the combine is players who are there but choose not to either run the 40 or do drills. They can, choose either. They can run the 40 and not do drills. They can do drills and not run the 40. They can do neither. Often are in their sweats, hanging out with their group, watching them, on the field go through drills. And so while I was watching Tet's wide receiver group, I stood right next to Tet. He is, as advertised, big dude. He is not as big as he was listed. No surprise at Arizona. He was listed at like a full 6'6", and you're like, he's not 6'6". But he is a big dude, and his tape shows a guy that can absolutely go get it, has a tremendous wingspan, really good hands, and, could be that kind of receiver for the Seahawks. Outside of, I think, trading up for him, they're probably not going to see him unless he chooses to run at his pro day and something terrible happens.
Well, and then if he chooses to run and then he's slow, I feel like that takes him off the Seahawks draft board because they tend to draft guys that are
True.
faster. So
true.
If
he is not going to run a DK 40. Let's be clear about that.
Well, that's what I want. But
that's what I want. If that's what you want, you probably should look towards guys like Savion Williams, who is really fast, and is also really big.
Well, it's another guy to watch. On the offensive side, though, I guess where I would prefer to go, EJ, is to the interior. We started talking about guard. The Bears fixed that issue. The Seahawks have not yet fixed that issue. Are there some guards in this draft in the first round? Gray Zabel, one of those guys that could play guard, could play center, and
Correct.
could be in that range that the Seahawks are drafting in.
If you get Gray Zabel, I will be jealous. Let's just put that on the table. I don't think the Bears are going to get him. It's a little early to get him at 10 unless they trade back. I would not advocate for it. That would drop him into the range where you or another team could grab him. Gray Zabel is great, folks. That's not news. He had a tremendous Senior Bowl. Combine was really about confirmation for him, not proving anything. He already proved what he needed to prove with his tape and his all-star game appearance and everything else. His testing was as expected, and his drill work was real good. Like if he ended up as a center on my team, I would be thrilled. He has true 5-position flexibility, played tackle in college. He's a guy like Elgton Jenkins, who is a real wild card. Not very many guys in the NFL can play all 5 spots. Gray Zabel could play all 5 spots. Tackle, as we just saw Joe Tooney do for the Chiefs in a pinch. But really his spot's going to be inside in the NFL. It's going to be center or guard. Either one will be fine. He has great movement skills. He is highly coordinated. His pulls look very, very smooth. He's a great player. Like I would be very happy to have a Gray Zabel on my team. So if that's who the Seahawks end up with, try and patch one of their interior offensive line holes, good on you. Smile all the way to the bank. He's going to be a 7-8 year starter in the NFL. You're all set.
Well, if you were mad about me bringing up that name, you're going to be mad about me bringing up this one because it's Jared Wilson, center out of Georgia, who ran the fastest of all the offensive linemen at 4.84. That is flying for a dude that big. And it wasn't particularly close. I mean, he was the only guy to run a 4.8 among the offensive linemen. Only 5 guys sub 5, and he can also play.
Yeah, a little bit of both. One from some from column A, some from column B. 6'3", 314 pounds, absolute unit, like a true athlete. Ran like a sprinter. Ran with very upright form, shoulders, whipping the arms. He, He ran a very fast time, and a lot of people say, "Oh, EJ, you just like him because he ran a fast time." I don't care how fast offensive linemen run. I care about their first 10. His first 10-yard split was very good. And then I care about their drills. And his drills were exceptional. Again, this is an experienced SEC center coming from Georgia. He's got requisite size, better, I would say, than average size for a center. A lot of centers tend to be 300 or a little bit less. He's well over 300. 6'3", some centers tend to be closer 6'2" or even 6 foot. He's got great size, but he has a tremendous base. He plays with a sort of swivel at his hips that you don't see from many offensive linemen. I was talking to Brett about this the other day, that a lot of times when we're talking about receivers, one of the things I'll say is he looks like an owl. Like his head doesn't move and his body moves and he makes an adjustment. Jared Wilson's lower half, for lack of a better term, looks like an owl. His feet and his base remain very neutral. He stays in a power position. Doesn't matter whether he's pivoting left, forward, right, back, center. He's got it. He is a very technically sound player, which is what you need at center. And then you have all that athleticism on top of it. So very high on Jared Wilson. He had a tremendous combine. He had good tape to go with it. A lot of boards have him around 100 right now. I think he's going to go well before that. I think as soon as, pick 65 ticks off or maybe 70, start looking for his name to get called by somebody that needs a center, and it might even be soon. Could be starting as a rookie. He has that level of ability.
Well, this is why I want to pick your brain about center, because I know the Bears need it as well. And you also do a Bears podcast.
Correct.
And who else should I be looking at as potential centers? Because I'm starting to get to the opinion, EJ, that center is one of those spots that maybe teams should draft every 4 years and move on from, kind of like running backs.
A little bit, and they should draft them higher than they do. For years, people were like, "Oh, you don't draft a center in the first. Oh, you don't draft a center in the second. Like, no sooner in the third." It was one of those positions that was just devalued, and it's so important. Like, this is the guy that's making the calls for your offensive line, and really, they call them the pivot for a reason. They are, if they make the right call, protections go well. If they make the right motions, protections go well as well. If they make mistakes, you have pressure up the middle instantly, and you can't afford it in today's NFL. So I think center is a priority position. And if you don't have one, I think it's kind of like quarterback. You need to go get one. Either that, or you need to have 4 other offensive linemen who are just great and can take up slack, and not many teams do.
Well, and Olu is fine. I
like Olu. He was actually a center I thought was a good developmental prospect. And, again, I didn't necessarily want him starting right away, but I thought he could work his way into that position. And I still think he can. Every offensive lineman in the NFL is one turned ankle away from not playing. And if Olu is your best option, that's not really the way you want to set it up. You at least want to set up a competition and have a backup, or have somebody that is clearly better than Olu who can start. And Olu would be a very good, very solid backup at center in the NFL. So it's tough if you want starters. You're really looking at guys like Zabel and Jared Wilson. And then there's a drop. You're not looking at another starting center, most likely, unless you're moving. Somebody like Will Campbell could play center. They did run him through the snapping drills. However, I got told that 31 of 32 NFL teams he talked to see him as a tackle. And only one team said guard, and it's because they have 2 good tackles. So it's 31-1 with an asterisk that thinks he's a tackle. So he's not playing center. They're not going to move him in there. Really, you drop down to Seth McLaughlin, who is the Ohio State center. Had an injury, but sounds like he's going to come back. But again, are you picking somebody in the 140s, 150s, 160s to be your starting center as your only option? I mean, it would be good competition. He's a very good player, but do I want him as a rookie taking the entire load with kind of all the weight on his shoulders? I don't necessarily. So a lot of times we have maybe 3 or 4 starting centers in this draft. We probably have 2. Unless you see another, converted tackle prospect as somebody that could play center. I don't particularly. I do think there's a lot of good centers later on down who can be really good backups. Guys like Jonah Monheim, Jake Majors had a really good combine from Texas. Miles Frazier had his moments, sort of in and out on that one. And then a local guy, Joshua Gray, who is the Oregon State center, I like a lot. We got to interview him at Shrine Bowl. I got to talk to him again at the combine. He is exceptionally smart, like literally set records on the cognition tests. He was like top 5 of anybody they've ever tested, not just at center. Brilliant dude. Also has some really good athleticism. Had a great testing profile in Indy. But again, like if you're taking Josh Gray and thinking he's going to be your starting center, that's a desperation move. Could he work his way into that? He absolutely could. Do you want to do that this season? You probably don't.
I was disappointed you didn't say Drew Kendall, the guy that we interviewed at Shrine. But
I like Drew. Drew is actually after Josh for me. Drew is Pete Kendall's kid, played at Boston College just like his dad did. I like Drew a lot, and I think he's going to be one of those guys that gets drafted, fringe, like late 6th, early 7th. Somebody's going to pick him up. He's maybe going to start on the practice squad. He's going to kind of toil along. Then there's going to be an injury. He's going to get into a lineup within a couple of years because it happens. Offensive linemen get injured in the NFL, and people are going to go, damn, he's really solid. Like, he's really smart. He's really solid. He's just never going to leave. He's going to be one of those guys. It's like, oh, I didn't think he was that. Oh, he's really good at his job. He ran the 5-10-5, the little shuttle stuff that they do after all the workouts, which is we could talk about that later. It's a silly way to do it. It's a bad test to run after a full offensive line workout. He ran that thing like 6 times trying to get his best time. Like he was not going to spit the bit. He kind of had his fangs through the floorboards to get his very best time. And he's just a competitor, man. He's a guy that you want. He's not going to give up. He's going to strain to the end of the play. Drew Kendall is one of those guys I think will rise a little bit through the process. We'll definitely have a draftable grade by the time we get to the draft. We'll get picked up late. Not a lot of expectation. And there's always a few of those guys, especially interior offensive linemen in the draft, that just wait for an opportunity. Cordell Volson was another one. He was an NDSU guy that ended up going to the Bengals. Same thing, waited his turn, got in, and then everybody was like, we're not taking him out of the lineup. Like, he's really solid.
Well, Drew ended up being sub 1.8 in the 10-yard split. So that puts him in one of the upper tiers for those guys too. So.
Yeah, no, he's getting it at home, right?
Oh yeah,
Pete's telling him like, this is how you do this.
Well, we asked him at Shrine. We said, when you started playing football, and he's like, oh yeah, my dad got me into it kind of early, and said, well, what position did you play? Guard.
Yeah, right.
Of course.
Dad was like, you're not straying.
Right at guard.
You're not straying from here, son. This is where you belong. Trust me. No, he's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, he was fun to talk to too. So, other than that, any other guards that, because it seems like people are saying that this is a relatively deep-ish guard class?
I went into the combine thinking that the interior offensive line class, guards and centers, which are typically grouped together, and the tackle class were fairly even. If anything, I thought the tackle class had a little bit of an edge. After watching all the drills on the field, I feel differently about that. I feel like a bunch of those quote unquote tackles are guards. I think the guard class or the interior offensive line class is better and deeper. And I actually like a lot of the prospects there. I think the tackle class does not have a lot of premium talent. That is guys that you could put out on an island, right or left. And feel very good about them starting as rookies and pass protecting against the mutants they're going to see every week. There's a lot of guys I like as backup and swing tackles, developmental tackles who could work their way into starting roles. But if you need a like plug and play starter day one to go out and just hold it down, this is not the tackle class that you're used to from previous years. There are a few guys, but the balance of those guys that I talked about that people view as tackles sort of sliding in to the guard ranks really sort of reinforces that class and makes it really good. And the guy that I was most excited about, that I had some questions about going in, I think, like, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Is Jonah Savai from Arizona. So a lot of people were like, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? I watched his combine workout and I came away saying, like, that's a guard, folks. Like, that is a starting guard right now, left or right. I don't care. Power gap scheme or wide zone scheme, don't care. Like, he can run. He's extremely powerful. He is quick. He has boats for feet. Like, I have no idea how big his feet are. They're like 18 at a minimum, but he can get them up and down. They give him a tremendous base. He is incredibly solid from the lower body all the way up to his shoulders. One of the things about all the drills in India is when the players are returning from whatever rep, whether it was a receiver running a route or, a tight end doing a blocking drill or a guard doing a pull drill, they run by you when you're on the field to sort of return to the group. And like when Jonah ran by me, I was like, damn, his shoulders are the size of my head. Like, he is a solidly built dude, and he is an athlete through and through. He is a mover. He is super powerful. He is very controlled. I think he is going to play in this league for a very long time. So I think a lot of people were like, oh, guard is kind of a slight, like, oh, he can't play tackle. I was like, no, folks, that is a starting guard straight up. And he's probably going to go in the 70s, would be my guess, for like range where he's going to go. So, but if you get him, I swear to you, he is a plug and play guard from day one, right or left. And he's one of those guys not leaving the lineup. Like, outside of injury, he's not leaving the lineup. That guy is going to, play until you give him a second contract, and he's going to play and maybe go for third. You might think that's too rich for your blood. He's going to go play for another team. Like, that dude had a great workout. Came away feeling really, really good about his pro prospects as guard, and not a backhanded compliment at all. Like, that's a dude. Like, that's a guy I want on my team.
Well, while we're talking about the offensive side of the ball, while we're talking about guys we want on our team, I can't help but go to tight end because Clinton Bonner has been blowing up my cell phone with clips of Tyler Warren, tight end from Penn State, this entire week, EJ.
And rightfully so. He may go above the Seahawks pick. He is that good. I really like Tyler Warren. He is my tight end one in this class. I like Colston Loveland, but I really think Colston Loveland is a power slot. And again, that's no backhanded compliment. We've seen guys excel in that role, no matter what their label is. Colston Loveland, I think, is going to be a very good player, but he is a big receiver that runs routes. He has a couple of blocks that he can execute well. Everything else, not really a thing. Tyler Warren is bigger. He is not quite as smooth, but he is far more versatile. We're talking about a guy that was a high school quarterback. Penn State lined him up out wide as a wide receiver, in the slot, in line, as a fullback, as a center who was eligible. Yes, that's true. They ran an unbalanced line. They had him snap the ball, but he was an eligible receiver, and he caught the touchdown on that play. They've had him run Wildcat. He's scored multiple times on that. He's thrown passes. He's been part of reverses on both sides, both throwing and receiving. This is a football player. Doesn't matter where you put him on the field. He's got great size. I didn't think I could love him anymore. And then he had a quote came out last week that his dad said that he should wear his number because it was John Riggins's number, and that's the way he should play football. And I was like, okay, fine. Sold, take my money. Like, I love you a lot. I wish you were on my team. I don't think he's going to end up as a Bear, but he is a tremendous football player, great receiver, looks to run over people after he catches the ball. That's how he gets his yak. Powerful blocker, good size. And again, this tremendous versatility, can throw, can catch, can line up out wide, inside, literally anywhere. So if you've got a creative play caller, like, he's your guy.
So outside of, and I feel like you've named kind of the guys projected in the first round with Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. Probably not going to be back-to-back years where we take a Michigan tight end, especially if he's not more on the blocking side. I think that's probably more toward where I guess I'd lean as a Seahawks fan. At least I don't know what John Schneider would want to do, but it does feel like a need still. So if we slide back a little bit, do guys like Mason Taylor or I don't know the tight end out of Miami, Arroyo, do either of those fit kind of what I'm looking for?
Arroyo is not going to be your favorite as a blocker. He can certainly do it. I'm interested to see what his medicals were. Like, I don't get to see that, but
Mm-hmm.
I really like Elijah Arroyo. Like, I think that guy is the truth as a receiving tight end with good size. He had a great season at Miami this year. I really, really like the guy. Chose not to run at the combine. We went out to dinner that night after we left the field, and he and his, I assume, girlfriend and mom came in and were waiting to get seated right after us. And I felt like asking him about his knees, but I thought that was a little gauche, so I just didn't. But I love him, and I brought him up to a couple other analysts I'm friends with, and they immediately said, "Too bad his knees are cardboard." And I was like, "Oh man." And he does have an injury history, but I would love to see what the MRIs and the doctors at Indy came up with in terms of his projection. Of course, every team will view that differently, but I really like him. Mason Taylor, I'm a little underwhelmed by. If you're looking for a guy that can kind of get after it blocking and offer some receiving as well, I would go Terrence Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon. He has I would say, pretty well-rounded game that I think a lot of people were kind of overlooking before his combine performance, which was very good. And it matches his tape. I don't think there were a lot of surprises on there. I think just a lot of people weren't really familiar with him. I think he's a well-rounded guy, and if you need somebody that can do a little bit of both down the board, again, probably going to go somewhere between the mid 60s and the mid 80s, depending on whose team and whose board. Terrence Ferguson would probably be where I would go for that.
Well, moving over to the defensive side, EJ and another guy who chose not to run at the combine, a guy that I know we were both kind of looking forward to as his potential because you sat down with him at Shrine Bowl, Kenneth Grant, and he said he was going to run a 4.8 or 4.9, took a
Yeah.
hamstring injury, didn't get to see him run at the combine. Was
Hamstring
it a
injury.
real
I love that.
hamstring injury or is it one of those hamstring injuries?
Man, Michigan hides players for a program that brags about how well they train players, and they do. They have an amazing strength and conditioning program at Michigan. I'm not trying to slight that at all. However, for a school that chirps a lot about all those numbers and posts videos of guys doing PRs on weights and whatever else, they've had very few guys work out fully at the combine over the last 3 years. They quote unquote hide players as well as any program in the country. And I think that's weird because they really do have a good strength and conditioning program. We've seen guys like Chris Jenkins come out of there who are absolute freaks and literally on Bruce Feldman's freaks list. And Kenneth Grant is another one. Like, I don't doubt that he can run that. We'll see. The question with Kenneth Grant isn't physical. It's, can he turn that on all the time? Because when you see the reps on tape, when he puts it all together, and they are there, this isn't I hope he can do it someday. He can do it, but you do see long stretches where he doesn't do it. And you're like, come on, man, do the thing. Be that absolutely dominant game wrecker we just saw you be, because you are 340. I heard he's down to about 332. He's about 6'4". And yeah, I believe he could run a high 4.8, low 4.9. And at 330, that's bananas.
Mm-hmm.
That is rare athletic ability. And you do see it on tape. It does translate, but not all the time. So if you believe in your defensive line coach and you believe in your system and you think you can coax that out of him all the time, you take that guy just about as high as you can, because there are very few players that have that athletic profile. If you don't think that motivation is a thing that you can instill, in a player, I would be a little bit more wary, and he would probably slide down the board a little bit because you don't know that you're going to get it all the time. You know it's in there and it's super tantalizing, but you got to know, you got to feel really confident about your coaching staff.
Do you think it helped his case as far as maybe falling to the Seahawks by not running the 40? Or
No, I think people are really looking at the tape and they have their opinion set about we
because it's
love
kind of in
this,
that
and
range, but he may not last to 18, right?
he might not. It only takes one team, of course, but it is possible that that's about where his natural range is. I think his teammate gets taken first. That's just one more defensive lineman that, is selected and pushes him a little bit farther down the board. He is wildly talented. Like, there is no doubt about that. He's a great dude. Really enjoyed interviewing Kenneth. We just put out our video with him yesterday on Bootleg, so you can go check that out if you want to sort of get a better sense of the guy and the player. Um, I think he's got all the things he needs. He just needs to be able to turn it on a regular basis. And if he does, he's going to be like a top 10 or 15 defensive tackle in the league. He has that kind of talent, but he has to do it. And lots of guys have had that kind of talent. Very few of them have become that level of player. So I hope the two things line up for him, because great dude and I'm rooting for him. And it would just be fun as a football fan to see him wreak that kind of havoc week to week.
Mason Graham, the other defensive tackle out of Michigan, that is a teammate of his. How about the defensive tackle group as a whole? And a lot of depth there going into this.
It's tremendous. Right? It's awesome. I would say probably the first deepest position group in this draft. I was going to say running back, but I think there's a few less guys. There's like 40 defensive tackles that have draftable grades, which is twice as many as usual. Usually it's somewhere between 18, 20, 23, 25 on a good year. There's literally 40, depending on whose board you're looking at, 40, 41, as high as 43 defensive tackles that have draftable grades this year. That's nuts. And the league could use it, but you're going to get them at every level. You literally can't pick that many in one round, even if you picked all defensive tackles. So you're going to see guys in the third, in the fourth, that are contributing, that are starters, that are impact players. And that's not typical. And it's just because it's so deep. There are so many defensive tackles and interior defensive players this year that really, I think, are just kind of awesome. Like, I love this class, and it starts up top with the guys we talked about from Michigan. Nolan from Mississippi is amazing. Again, 3 guys off the Ole Miss line are getting drafted. 3 guys off the Oregon line are getting drafted. Derek Harmon, Birch, and Jamari Caldwell. You've got Tyleik Williams from Ohio State, who's awesome. TJ Sanders from South Carolina. You go down to Alfred Collins is a favorite of mine from Texas. I think he has some real potential as a game wrecker on the inside. Omar Norman Lott from Tennessee, who's one of the most powerful players in this class. Guy we interviewed at Shrine, Jordan Phillips from Maryland. Deion Walker, who is a ridiculous specimen of a dude. Like, guys, he plays at Kentucky. Guys that big should not move that fast. Like, it's against the laws of physics. JJ Pegues is the third guy off the Ole Miss line. I love him. We saw him at Shrine. Very athletic guy. And it just keeps on going. You get, one of my favorites way down the board, Ty Robinson, had a tremendous combine. Nebraska defensive tackle. People aren't talking about him. He's in the 200s on most boards. Like, you look at his size, speed, and production profile, and you're like, how is this guy in the 200s? Like, there's only 250 draft picks. Like, right. That would be a top, that would be a day 2 pick on most years. And you're talking about a late day 3 pick. So great class, lot of depth, a lot of players, every flavor you want. Fast little 3 techs, huge guys that are going to be stumps against the run, guys that are sort of all around forces. Like, you can pick and choose in this draft what kind of defensive tackle you want or defensive tackles. I think we'll see lots of teams double dip because they're just going to get down. And if they follow a BPA strategy, they're going to go, dude, this guy's awesome. And he's still here. Like I'm going to take him.
Well, that may explain why the Seahawks thought some of their interior defenders were, they were able to let them go. So, yeah, you pick up those guys late, and then instead of drafting in the trenches, you go back to safety and you pick a guy who really balled out at the combine and pick Nick Emanwari out of South Carolina.
You could, but you're going to have to pick him a few picks higher than you would have before the combine. And it's only a few picks. There was no surprise about Nick Emanwari in terms of we knew he was going to be good. Like you could tell from the tape that he was fast and that he was long and explosive. We're talking about a guy at 6'3", 220, South Carolina safety. And I was talking to Jordan Reed about a week before the combine, and we were just kicking back names, back and forth. Like, who do you think's going to ball out? Who do you think's going to go off? Like different position groups. And he said Nick Emanwari is going to go nuts. And I was like, yep, I wouldn't bet against that. And Jordan grabs a seat right behind the vertical jump. Like he takes a seat right on the rail, and so he can look down and record the results. And I was down on the field, so we were like 10 feet apart. And I actually recorded Nick's jump and put out a tweet about it. But his first jump was like 42, and his second jump was 43. He got an extra inch on the second jump. It's a guy that's 6'3" with like 32 something inch arms, almost 10-inch hands, who can jump almost 4 feet straight up. That means the sort of area of denial for him playing safety towards a quarterback in terms of the ability to throw over him is like greater than the story of a building. Like he can just block out that much of the field because and then he ran like a 4.29 or something.
Yeah, it was fast.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about a guy that is incredibly athletically talented.
So not
4.38. So I was giving him extra 10th. But still sub 4.4 at 6'3", 220. Broad jumped, I think 11.9. Vert jumped 43. And then, just for fun, threw up, even with those huge long arms, 22 reps or something like that. Like this is an athlete that had an all-time combine, just crushed it. He threw up 20 reps on the bench. His broad was 11.6. Both of those numbers led the combine for safeties. 43-inch vert. His 10-yard split was 1.49. Again, best among safeties. He literally ruled every drill as a prototype size guy at safety. So you might have been able to get him at 50 or 60 before the combine. He's going in the 40s at this point. He's just too great of an athlete to let go.
Well, and I've heard, based on the size, getting a lot of those comparisons to Cam Chancellor. And I haven't had a chance to go and watch much of his tape. I've seen some of the highlights. And I don't know if they just did the highlight videos wrong, but I saw a lot of interceptions, and I saw like 2 tackles. And
he's not the hitter. He's not the hitter Cam was. Like
I
very
went to it
few
looking for a Cam Chancellor hits, and I was disappointed.
Yeah, very few players in the NFL period are hitters like Bam Bam. I mean, that guy was an all-time hitter. If you're looking for safeties that can absolutely bring it, much smaller than either Cam or Nick Emanwari, but Andrew Makuba out of Texas is a player I like a lot. He's going to go right around 100, little before, little after. Has great center field range, but will absolutely bring it. Now, he doesn't have great size, but you wouldn't know it on the field. The 2 players that'll probably go right around or after him, Jonas Sanker is a favorite of mine out of UVA. He's a bit bigger than Makuba, and his closing speed from that like 10 to 15 yard depth when he's kind of lurking, and then the quarterback like decides, I'm going to break, I'm going to break on this bootleg and just take off, is instant. He surprises those guys and just levels them. really like Jonas Sanker as a hitter. And then Billy Bowman Jr. is, I swear to God, piss and vinegar in a bottle. Like he's out of Oklahoma and he just loves to mess people up. He gave one of the greatest quotes of the combine. He said, "I want to suffocate an offense. Like I don't want to give them any air to breathe. I want to make them give up." And I was like, "Come play for my team, kid. I've seen your tape. You hit like a hammer and have that mentality. It all translates." So those are three of the bigger hitters at safety. They're all going to go somewhere between 90 and about 150, I would say, is probably the floor for Billy Bowman. He'll probably go a little bit before that, but Makuba and Sanker right around 100, somewhere in there if you're looking for safeties that can really play.
And that feels about right to me because I don't feel like safety is necessarily a need for Seattle.
Right.
We saw Kobe Bryant emerge as being a very capable safety, and yeah, so I'm not that concerned about it, especially when you have Julian Love on the back end too. And but I could see some depth being a need there. It's just I think it's fun to consider Imanwari just
Because he's an absolute beast. Yeah, it's
yeah.
pretty darn cool. When you're standing next to a guy that tall, I'll tell you, and he jumps 43 inches straight up, it looks like he's just going to keep going. Like
Right.
he jumps up and you're like, is he going to stop or is he just going like straight to the roof? It's a sight to behold. 220 elevating to 43 inches is something else athletically.
EJ, if I'm a guy who's worried about whether or not Ernest Jones is going to re-sign with the Seahawks,
Okay.
Is there a linebacker that could replace that spot in the draft?
Of course there is, but it's a question of, look, you paid a bunch for Ernest Jones and other linebackers because Mike Mack, halfway through last year went, I don't have what I need to run the middle of my defense. And they went and got it, and that was Ernest Jones. So you're going to need a guy that can do that, right? That can take that load mentally and physically and be the guy. Like you're not looking for a backup to develop. If you're talking about Ernest Jones not being back, you're going to have to take that player up high. First pick is 18. Now, pre-combine, I would have said, this is your guy. Post-combine, you're probably not getting him. And his name's Jihad Campbell. He is out of the University of Alabama. He is an absolute beast. He is one of the first players in this draft. I got to his tape and I was giggling halfway through the first tape. And I was like, this guy plays football like I like people to play football. Extremely talented, great range, good size, good instinct, great trigger as an inside linebacker. The reason I say you're not going to get him now after the combine is not because he ran fast or jumped well. He did both. He stayed late. The scouts are questioned. Now, scouts can do this from different teams. They can say of any position player, like, hey, will you hang out and do something else? Sometimes they do this with tight ends and they run them through fullback drills, or sometimes they do this with wide receivers and they run them through the tight end drills, or they hold a middle linebacker in this case and they say, hey, will you do the pass rush drills that we put edges through? And they did this with Jihad Campbell. He was the only middle linebacker that they held back to do it. And he looked fluid as hell going through the pass rush drills. And that was that. Jihad Campbell was going high because now you have a player you don't have to take off the field. First two downs, you can run him at middle linebacker. He can cover. He can go sideline to sideline, sniff out mobile quarterbacks. He can snuff running backs through gaps. He has size, speed, range to do all that. And then on third down, oh yeah, by the way, you can put in the NASCAR package, run him off the edge, and he can pass rush as well. That makes him extremely valuable. Again, no other middle linebackers are asked to do this. He did it looking very, very solid. The only other possibility for that range would be Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia. I don't think he's as good in the middle. I think he has to play off the edge despite his size, whereas Jihad Campbell has the versatility to really play in either spot. So I think Jihad Campbell's going to go a lot higher than people think he is. Certainly a lot higher than he would have before the combine.
All right, well, settle an argument for me. Easier
Okay.
to replace Ernest Jones in this draft or easier to replace DK Metcalf in this draft?
Ooh. It's challenging to replace either one. They're both quality players. I would say there are more options at wide receiver than there are at linebacker, but I would say the linebacker options will be drafted later. So
Gotcha.
that's kind of my hedge. Another guy that I would look at if you're looking to replace Ernest Jones would be Carson Schweschinger, the linebacker, middle linebacker from UCLA, who is a great or tragic story, depending on whose version you're listening to. He was a walk-on. They didn't play him. They didn't get him on the field until he was a senior, and then he just tore it up. And I really questioned the UCLA coaching staff. I'm like, literally, you didn't think this guy was good enough to be starting? Tremendous coverage player, a lot like Ernest Jones. He's going to go mid-second round, 50s, if I had to guess. But can run and cover in the way that Mike Mack needs in that defense. So Schweschinger is another guy that I would take a look at if you think Jihad Campbell's too rich for your blood, and he just might be. I forgot to tell you, but I probably should. I met Mike Mack at this combine.
Oh, hey, did you get any news out of him? What?
News is hard to come by from team sources at these events, especially if they don't know you. But by the time I was done talking to Mike Mack, he was introducing me to his guys, so I feel like I did okay.
Right.
I just happened to be hanging out at the bottom of the staircase at Prime 47, which is the bar that everybody ends up at. And I was facing this way and kind of had my arm over the rail, and like my arm got bumped, and there was a guy standing on the other side of the low side of the rail facing the other way. And I look over and it's a broad-shouldered dude, and it's Mike Mack. And I was like, oh, okay. And it's college bar packed at this point. Everybody's, beer to chest. And I thought, well, if you're ever going to take your chance, now's the time. And so I waited until he was done saying something. And I got to say, he is who you think he is. He is salt of the earth. I was in the middle of talking to him, and one of his crews said, "Hey man, can I get you something to drink?" And he looked at him and he goes, "Yeah, beer." Not any specific type of beer, just give me a beer.
Whatever.
And I was like, okay, you're the man. Right. So anyways, we chatted for a while again. He introduced me to some of his guys, and I felt pretty good about that. So great dude, very much the way he portrays himself in the media. There's no difference there. There's no gap.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like he puts on a show for media at
all. No, there's no putting on airs. He is that dude through and through.
No, and the reason why I asked you too about the DK versus Ernest Jones, it's mostly just that idea of you can only pay so many guys.
Oh yeah.
And if you're going to look to pay one versus the other, how do you fill behind that in the draft? And that's
for sure
always a big question this time of year, and if that's even possible. But I want to keep everybody. That's just the way.
Yeah, that's right. I want to pay all the guys, all the things. Yeah, that's every GM.
I mean, the Eagles do it. They just add 15 void years to everybody's contract. Why
that's
not?
Right. They just make it happen and wait for that huge TV money drop that's coming. So
yeah, we'll get here eventually. He's EJ Snyder of Bootleg Football. EJ, always got to thank you for coming on, taking some time. And I know there's a lot of positions we didn't cover, but there's still some time before we get to the draft.
Yeah, exactly. We got somebody reminded me yesterday, like 50 days, and I was like, shut up.
Oh.
Yeah, and then
you're going to have a very busy schedule then on
it's true
football with only 50 days left to go, because you haven't even started your normal stretch of interviews of all these top guests that you tend to bring on leading up to the draft.
Yeah, we are. We're scrambling a little bit. I'm making that schedule tomorrow morning to try and put those ass out. But we did talk to a lot of those folks at the combine, and they did say that they will hop on with us again very graciously. So I imagine we will see some of our cast of characters like JT O'Sullivan. Matt Harmon will be on with us this year. I did a pod with him at the Combine. I would imagine we will see maybe a random DJ sighting or Mina. As we've had in past years, Matt Bowen has been a standard for us, Jordan Reed, Matt Miller, those guys. So we will be reaching
Brandon
into the
Thorne?
grab bag. What's
Thorne going to
that?
be back on as someone looking for offensive line? Brandon Thorne?
Absolutely. I
good.
took Brandon and Duke Manyweather to breakfast on Saturday. It was originally just supposed to be Thorne, and he texted me and said, "Hey, could Duke come to breakfast?" And I was like, "Of course, Duke can come to breakfast. I would love to pick his brain about all his guys." Duke's got Will Campbell and a bunch of other guys in this draft, as he always has, and a lot of insights about how these tests are run and how you train guys for them. And his the top 5 guys for overall athleticism score for O-line were all Duke guys.
Awesome.
So he knows of what he speaks, but he's a great guy as well, and had breakfast with Duke and Brandon on Saturday. Got to pick their brains a little bit. But yeah, we'll have Brandon back on talking about O-line, and yeah, as many as we can fit in, as many Shrine Bowl interviews as we can fit in. And then new for this year is extra content that goes on for every Shrine Bowl interview, where we kind of give a little bit of behind the scenes or extra analysis on Patreon. And that's worked out really well. The response to that's been really good. So if you're interested in that, head over to Bootleg Football, click on the Patreon link. It comes at the very first level, which I think is $5 a month, and you will get lots of draft content, including our exclusive draft rankings, which only come to Patreon folks who support us.
I get it every year. I support Bootleg Football out on Patreon. You should too. And while you're there, you can support our show. GetItInTheFlock.com. GetInTheFlock.com. That gets you to our Patreon page as well. So yeah, just do it all in one shot. If you're not a member of ours, just hop on over to EJ's, hop on over to ours, subscribe to both, and you'll get all kinds of bonus coverage leading up to this year's draft.
I know why you buy it. You buy it just so you can look at my rankings and then roast me when I'm wrong.
Well, that might be a little bit of it too.
Oh,
but,
just just a wee bit. That's okay. That's why we put them out there. It's fair game at that point.
I look at it for the running back rankings, and I know we didn't get to talk running backs because it's not so much of a need for the Seahawks, but this is a heck of a running back.
We should get back together and talk about running backs just for the fun of it, because that is a sort of beer and popcorn show this year. The running back class is, it's almost as deep as the defensive tackle class, which is redonkulously deep. This is as someone that loves running backs, deeply loves running back play, this is a pure popcorn class. It is so much fun to scout.
Yeah, and John Snyder called it out too on one of his shows, and he normally doesn't call out position groups, but
it's hard to avoid this one because I did 15 guys before I went to the Combine. I probably really liked like 7 or 8 of them. And at the Combine, there were 4 or 5 more guys that I were like, so what I do when I come home and guys that really had great combines that I didn't get to watch in my top like 135-ish watch before I get to the Combine, I put a C next to their name and they get the first rewatches when I get back. There were like 3 running backs that got C's. I was like, damn, that guy's awesome. Oh man, I really like that guy. Oh man. It's like just throwing C's. I try and keep that group pretty small so I can get through it pretty quickly, but there were too many good running backs not to throw some of those grades out to them.
Well, something to look forward to, as hopefully we have you on back again before the draft. EJ, really want to thank you again. And yes, go subscribe to Bootleg Football out on YouTube. Subscribe and like this show as well.